Some of you who are here might remember that at few previous assemblies we had a delegation from the Pacific Island states. And many people found it paradoxical why ministers of fisheries, officials, indigenous leaders from the Pacific Island states were at an Arctic Circle assembly. And these delegations were year after year led by Sue Taei, a remarkable woman who was the leader of bringing the people of the Pacific into this Arctic Assembly. She was a pioneer, a true representative of the interests and the concerns and the responsibilities of the island people of the Pacific. And she proudly brought them to Iceland and to this assembly. And then when she was in the middle of bringing this forward to a formidable Arctic global indigenous dialogue and a long-standing future partnership between the Pacific Island states and the people of the Arctic, she was diagnosed with cancer and died within a few months. And we decided to honor her memory here on this stage because she opened our eyes to the important realization that while we talk about the indigenous people of the Arctic, we need to talk about the indigenous people of the entire planet, that there is a sense of togetherness between people everywhere on the planet who have been custodians of the land, of the oceans, of the forests, and the fishing grounds. So now we will honor the memory of Sue Taei. And we will first show a short video of her dialogue on this stage. And then that will be followed by another video made by Conservation International, which was our partner in this endeavor, led by our good friend Peter Seligmann, who will then speak after that video here on the stage, as well as a representative of the fellowships that Conservation International has established to honor her memory. Then I will conclude with a few additional remarks. And with that, we also send our sympathy and condolences and greetings to her family and to her fellow islanders of all the Pacific Island states. So can we have these two videos, and after that I will invite my good friend Peter Seligmann on the stage.
You've heard from the people of the Arctic and the people of the Pacific, and you might have wondered why there's two empty chairs here. And there's one last message that we want to turn and give to you, particularly all the governments, NGOs, scientists, and people of the Arctic. This empty chair represents the high seas of the Pacific Islands region. This empty chair represents the amazing treaty we just found out about, that the nations of your region, together with nations that are very common in our region to come and fish, that for the first time, the Arctic has created a treaty because of climate change, under a framework that was created when no one talked about climate change. There is the ongoing voyage here of an exciting partnership for 21st century fisheries and ocean management. To use more of the fish, to catch less, use more, waste not, want not. It's island style, island scale, and I believe will also become the way of this planet.
Her conversation was not subtle. Her language was not passive. She was an activist, and she was direct, and she was super precise and super strong and smart. And I thought, this is an exceptional human being.
You know, it's a rare person who can see vision and share it and inspire people, but then also who actually has the moxie and the organizational capacity to actually get it done. You know, that was one of the most exceptional things about Sue and what I respected so much.
There was no question that when it came to delivering on her mission of caring for the people of the Pacific and the health of the ocean, she actually didn't separate the Pacific Ocean from the Pacific people. It was that complete interconnectedness. It was a oneness.
Sue knew deeply from her own experience, but also from working so long in the Pacific, is there are women, Indigenous women in the Pacific, who are absolutely brilliant, intelligent, problem-solving, strategic, and often just don't have the opportunity. They just need a little runway capital with someone else who believes in them.
Ko hukurangi te maunga, waiapu te awa, ko Ngāti Porou te iwi, ko Te Aomihia Walker tōku ingoa. My name's Te Aomihia Walker. I hail from the mountain of Hikurangi, the river of Waiapu, and am a descendant of Porourangi. Therefore, my tribe is Ngāti Porou.
O vau te ie o te puerau Aomihia, no te hitivo, e nuhu nei au I te ie mahana I numea, I niu taratunu.
I'm using the Sue Taei Fellowship to support me to attend the GROW Fisheries Training Program under the auspice of UNESCO in Iceland.
Je vais utiliser la Sue Taei Ocean Fellowship pour m'aider dans ma carrière professionnelle. Donc moi je travaille dans la recherche scientifique qui est un domaine très compétitif. Ce financement me permet d'effectuer un postdoctorat à l'IFREMER de Nouvelle-Calédonie. Et pour cela, je travaille sur les microalgues toxiques et nuisibles.
I'm also using the fellowship to support me with a project when I get back from Iceland. And that project is going to aim to elevate and showcase the management of our moana from the perspective of our whānau, hapu and iwi back here on the East Coast.
L'océan représente pour moi un réservoir de biodiversité exceptionnel. C'est une source de molécules actives intéressantes pour la santé humaine. Et je pense ici aux éponges marines, par exemple. Donc de ce fait, nous devons, je pense, d'apprendre à gérer cette ressource marine.
I would like to see just a huge network of Indigenous Pacifica women across the globe, leading, being the voice to, make sure our oceans are protected.
J'aimerais que les femmes océaniennes aient plus confiance en leur intuition, en leur capacité. Je pense que les femmes, ce sont des personnes polyvalentes et je pense qu'elles ont beaucoup de choses à apporter à la conservation du Pacifique.
Often in the conversations that Sue participated in at a global level, she was one of just a handful of women. So to have a fellowship that really elevates and gives opportunity to women of the Pacific, I think that just, increases the likelihood that we'll solve some of these problems enormously.
One thing I hope is that when we talk about Pacific women working in oceans, that it's about family, it's about relationship, it's about kinship, it's about livelihoods and jobs and education and wellness and health.
About 15 years ago, I went to the Cook Islands, and I had my first meeting with Sue Taei. And the first thing she said to me was, there are 17 small island nations that control an area of the earth that you can fit all the continents into. They're under the guardianship of indigenous peoples, largely. And she said, I think I know most of the heads of state by now. Do you think we can create a Pacific oceanscape and link them together? And I said, I have no idea, but let's try. A year later, I went back to the Cook Islands for a meeting of the Pacific Islands Leadership Forum, which was the gathering of all the heads of state. And Sue was with me. And one by one, we met with these different heads of state, and we posed the idea. How about a gathering, a collective engagement, because the ocean is part of each of you and each of us? The response was unanimous. Let's do it. But of course, with big ideas, there's lots of detail. And the genius of Sue Taei, who actually was of mixed blood from Scottish and Samoan, who married a Maori, the genius of her was that she had this big vision, and yet she had a great grasp of detail. I mean, nothing was forgotten. And everything had to work. And when we came up with ideas, she got to work in designing them. And what she said to me one day was, we're all talking about marine protected areas, but what we should be really thinking about are the exclusive economic zones of each of these nations. It needs to be everything, and it needs to be thoughtful, and it needs to be able to allow for the abundance, the security, the care, and yet there's so many stresses and threats from outside. How do we address international fleets that are marauding and stealing our fisheries? How do we make sure that there's an equitable share with all of the islanders? How do we solve these problems? How do we get the market involved? And how do we make certain that there's ownership rights? And she went to work on that. And you saw her and heard her. I have never met anybody like her, ever. She was a total force. And what I knew as soon as I met her was that the most important thing I could do was get out of her way. And I did. And she came here and she met President Grímsson, and they just hit it off. It was like love at first sight, because he did the same thing. He said, great, what do you need? And that's where that partnership came from, a beautiful partnership between Iceland, an island state, and the island states of the Pacific to see how do you actually learn from each other. And it was two-way. And it really evolved into magic. And right in mid-stride, she called and she said, I've got bad news. And then she went downhill quickly. I spoke to her perhaps a week before she passed away. She was in her hospital bed. She was bald. Her daughter, Jillian, was wiping her brow. Her husband was standing next to her. And she said to me, Peter, the most important thing is make sure that the women of the Pacific have the opportunity to take over. And she said, I've got some ideas. And that was from her hospital bed. And so out of that came this concept. Let's create a fellowship in her honor to elevate the voice of Indigenous women of the Pacific. And with that, I am just honored to introduce the first of the Sue Taei Fellows, Tero.
Tēnā koutou katoa, greetings in my own language. If you're patient with me, I'd like to sing a short lemnant from my tribe in honour of Sue. Haere rā e hika, koutou ko mātua, unuhia i te rito te harakeke, ka tū i te aroa kapa, aku nui aku rahi e, aku whakatamarahi ki te rangi e, waiho te iwi e, Mana e mai noa. Farewell, O loved one, to you and your ancestors. Taste the sweet honey of the harakeke, the native plant of New Zealand, as you join those who have departed. To us who remain, leave all our dear ones in the loving care of our Creator. Kia koe te mare kura Sue. Moi mai rā. Kia tau te rangi Māori e rungi a koe. Thank you, everyone. It's an absolute honour to be here. Firstly, it is custom in my culture to acknowledge the people of the land, the people of Iceland. Thank you for your hospitality, not only for this event, but during my 6-month stay here. I would also like to thank the Arctic Circle Mission Council and the Arctic Circle Assembly for your warm invitation to speak at this event. And then lastly, and importantly, I'd like to thank the Thai family, the Sue Taei Ocean Fellowship team, and Te Ohu Kai Moana for providing me the opportunity to be here today. I didn't have the honour of knowing Sue, but in support of the beautiful words we have heard and her love for the Pacific people and the Pacific Ocean, I'm inspired to do my best in carrying forward her spirit, vision, and legacy for the ocean, and not only in the work I am doing now as part of this fellowship, but the work I will do in the future. I am of Māori descent, whom are the Indigenous peoples of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and in my culture, we are born with a duty to ensure an Indigenous Māori presence on this earth and continue to sow the seeds of indigeneity so that future generations know that their grandmother or grandfather gave them a fighting chance to be Māori, to be Indigenous, in the 23rd, 24th, 25th century. That's how far we think ahead. So with that said, my key driver is to help in sustaining Māori and Indigenous identity for now and into the future through protecting, maintaining, and enhancing the Māori, or the life force, of Tangaroa, the god of the aquatic realm to us in Māori, and our reciprocal relationship with him as an ancestor. As mentioned in the video, I'm here to participate under the auspice of UNESCO in the Grow Fisheries Training Program, which aims to strengthen the professional capacity of fellows to actively contribute to work done in the organisations in home countries. I hope to broaden my knowledge in regional and global fisheries and establish relationships to contribute to the work I do at Te Ohu Kai Moana, which is the Māori Fisheries Trust based back in New Zealand that work to protect and enhance Māori customary fishing rights. I also want to contribute back to my own iwi, tribe, hapu, sub-tribe, and whānau, or immediate family, where the act of fishing and our relationship with the ocean is a significant aspect of our cultural identity. Lastly, I want to commend all those who made this fellowship possible. With your mentorship and support, as well as the network of Indigenous Pacifica women we hope to build, and the partnerships we hope to make here in the Arctic, of course, I'm sure we'll be able to help in advancing sustainable initiatives that is aligned with Indigenous worldviews and sustains our Indigenous identity now and into the future. Ka tiki konei, mai tua whakarere ki te ao mārama, huri no i te whare, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, takwhar.
We have heard how Sue served the people of the Pacific, but she also brought an extraordinary gift to us in the Arctic. She was the first person, literally the first person, to open our eyes to how much the people of the Arctic can contribute to other indigenous communities in faraway parts of the planet. We had all in the Arctic been so preoccupied with our own problems, with the struggle and the position of the indigenous people from Alaska over Canada, Greenland, into the northern part of Scandinavia, and then deep into Russia. The notion that the people of the Arctic had somehow through the decades, and especially in modern times, evolved in such a way and acquired achievements that could be shared with people even as far away as in the Pacific island states across the globe was a strange notion. to us all. And it was not until Sue brought the delegation to the States and to the Assembly that we realized that we have also the role of sharing our experiences and the way we do things and how we have empowered people in different parts of the Arctic with other parts in Latin America, in the Pacific, in Asia, in Africa. Because a big part of our planet, a quarter or more, is under the authority in one way or another of indigenous people. They're not run by national governments. They are run by the people who have been the guardians of the land and the forests and the oceans and other aspects of our planet for centuries, even millennia. So for that reason alone, Sue will always be remembered by us, because she was a true pioneer in reminding us that we also have a global role. We cannot be so preoccupied by the struggles and the difficulties and the challenges in the Arctic that we forget our civic duty of sharing that experience, those achievements, those models, those structures, those approaches with others. Very rarely does one meet an individual who opens our eyes in that way. And this woman of the islands from the Pacific, which Peter so brilliantly described, she did that here on this stage. And also meeting people from different Arctic parts. And she was going to do it in the years to come. We had already discussed how we would continue into the coming decade and other times, this common journey of island people in the Pacific and the people of the Arctic. We were going to go to the Faroe Islands, to Greenland, up to Alaska and other parts and bring them together. But unfortunately, she is no longer with us. And it's a great loss, not just for the people of the Pacific, but also for us. And that's why we decided to honor her memory here on this stage. And we will do it by asking all of you to stand up and remain silent for a brief moment while we look at this beautiful photograph of her standing at the most holy place for us in Iceland, the Þingvellir National Park, where we founded the Icelandic Republic more than 1,000 years ago. So let us remain silent for a brief moment to honor her memory. Thank you.